Well, hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Faculty Factory podcast. I'm Kim Skorupski here at the University of Texas Medical Branch in lovely Galveston, and I'm looking at a new friend and colleague, Dr. Michelle Moore. Dr. Moore is an associate professor of clinical psychiatry and orthopedic surgery. She is also the chief of psychology and the director of faculty development for orthopedic surgery at LSU Health Sciences Center in New Orleans. So welcome, Dr. Moore. We're so happy that you're here today on the Faculty Factory podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Folks, let me tell you how Dr. Moore got here. She was courageous enough and kind enough to listen to the podcast and then go to the facultyfactory.org website, expressed lovely regards and appreciation for the experts around the world like her who share their wisdom on the podcast, and offered her own insight and had wanted to share a story. So that's how she is here.
Well, our content for today is talking about a concept that I call sustainable wellness. And I wanted to take you back and kind of give you the timeline of how sustainable wellness began for me and kind of where it's evolved to today and why I'm here talking with you on Faculty Factory about it. So sustainable wellness started for me in 2021. I had a colleague of mine from pulmonary critical care reach out and ask if I would come do a wellness talk to their residents and fellows. This is 2021, so this is kind of still in the land of COVID. So their trainees are struggling. So I started putting together a PowerPoint and thinking, what kind of a workshop would I like to do with these trainees to do something different, not just to come in and talk about self-care and mindfulness and some of the things I've talked about before, but how can I talk about wellness in more of a holistic way to help them think more broadly about caring for themselves and what are they doing in their everyday work that actually relates to wellness. And so I found through the National Wellness Institute these 6 dimensions of wellness, which we'll go into kind of in more detail later on, but they're emotional, physical, intellectual, occupational, spiritual, and social. So those are our 6 dimensions. And so as I'm kind of putting this PowerPoint together and I'm talking when I went and did the training with them, it was a great workshop. We had really nice discussion. And then I had the MedPeds residents reach out and they wanted a wellness workshop. And so I went and did one for them. And then I started to get asked to do more of these workshops. And as I do these workshops, I'm finding this is meaningful for me. This fills my purpose, going to do these workshops. This is part of my intellectual wellness, is being able to share my wisdom, which is part of me being here today. This is part of my intellectual wellness, is doing a podcast and being able to talk about the meaning of this work. This fills my wellness cup, being able to talk about this. So for me, this is all kind of my personal journey of being able to share this type of thing with other people, helping them become more self-aware as they think about what are they doing for themselves, not just personally, but also professionally within their work on a daily basis. What are they doing that's kind of in line with all of these 6 dimensions, kind of taking care of themselves? So continuing forward kind of to more present day, I end up putting these things together and I wrote a book last year, which others can't see, but I will show you.
Sustainable Wellness. Let me hold a memoir of loss, perseverance, and resilience. Dr. Michelle B. Moore. Congratulations.
Thank you. So for me, this was a combination of being able to actually put together a story for myself of how I actually realized I've utilized these 6 dimensions of wellness, helping myself to overcome grief and loss within my own life. And that understanding how, from a professional standpoint, I was really able to harness these dimensions to be able to find meaning through my work. Kind of taking it back even further, my mother had been diagnosed with ALS in 2017. I cared for her and she passed away in 2019. And so this has kind of all become part of my story. But all through that, I had to find my own wellness, right? How do I take care of myself? I'm a psychologist for a living. So I have to care for myself and make sure that I'm fully taken care of in order to actually care for my patients and be there, be fully present for them. Because I think I have to be able to do that in order to do a really good job as a therapist.
Yeah.
And so as I'm thinking about all of this, I end up deciding that I want to write about it. And I want to write about this journey that I've been through. And as I'm talking with residents, I'm talking with fellows, I'm talking with other faculty, I'm hearing all of their stories come up. And I'm thinking of my story of what I've gone through in my personal life. And I'm hearing their stories of what they're going through. And there's these similarities of how we lean on other people for support. And that's our social wellness. So when do we need others and when do we need alone time to be able to process things by ourselves? When do we need this intellectual wellness? When do we need to share our stories with other people? For me, writing is part of that intellectual wellness. Where do people really feel fulfilled? Going to conferences and being able to connect with people through that, and they come back reinvigorated because they've been at a conference, right? That all contributes to our wellness. Our spiritual wellness. For some people, that comes through religious places. For others, it comes from just finding purpose in the work that you're doing, right? For working in academic medicine, there's a reason why we work with the populations that we do and why we work in these settings, why we are involved in training and teaching. And when you can connect to that purpose, it fills that wellness cup. And so helping spread that message to other people. And so this is all what I wrote about in my book. And so then being able to put that into writing and then hearing other people talk about it, all has just been so rewarding for me. And so I kind of getting into the year 2024, I took it to this new level, starting to work with the Department of Orthopaedic Surgery about a year and a half ago. And when I was asked to start doing faculty development with them, I thought, I feel like there is a connection between faculty development and this concept of sustainable wellness. That, yes, I have talked about it a lot on a personal level and just as individuals. Most of my workshops are about you thinking of yourself as an individual and how you're filling your wellness cup and how you think about wellness across these 6 dimensions. But what do we do on departmental levels? Right? If you think about as a department, as a section, as a team, there's actually a lot that you do to bring people together. Journal clubs, you bring people together for different types of meetings. You're offering a lot that actually is filling a lot of these dimensions of wellness. And so in the Department of Orthopaedic Surgery, the department chair and I, meet regularly to talk about what they do in that department for faculty development. And he even said, I never thought of it that way. These concepts are not a way that I was thinking about. I thought of faculty development as activities that I needed to give people or workshops I needed to offer. And I said, I think there's actually more to it than that. It's more than just a workshop. It's a way of being. It's a way of thinking. It's more holistic.
Yeah, it's not only transactional, but transformational. That I love the way you're thinking, Michelle, that you are making these part and parcel, one and the same, that it's not an either or, it's not a checking a box, going to a thing, but rather being in a place of growth mindset, of wellness, just that is the thread that goes through everything we do. I love it.
100%. Yes. Yes. And growth mindset is part of that story of kind of what I talk about too. Yes, that you have to see that all those things are a part of it. Being flexible, being able to bounce back, being resilient, right? Overcoming a challenge. There's going to be challenges. And part of your ability to be self-aware is understanding when you're faced with a challenge, how are you aware of that happening? And then how do you bounce back after that so that you can feel balanced again and kind of right yourself and have that growth mindset to know that you're going to move forward and things are going to get better and you keep going forward, So with the orthopedic surgery department, as we start kind of thinking more about this, and yes, it being more transformational, not transactional. I like the way you said that. We worked with another colleague, Dr. Wendy Ward, up in Arkansas, and put together a workshop at GFA last summer that was really about maybe let's share this with other people, see if this concept makes sense for others. The fact that there's really if we can intertwine faculty development with wellness to be able to think about it on an individual level, a departmental type of level, team level, but then also an institutional level. And if we can really start to map out what do we do across these 6 dimensions at all these various stages, so that we can see that we are offering wellness to individuals, we're offering wellness. It also feels good about that, what we know we're already contributing. It's not something extra that we have to do. One of the things the department chair in orthopedics had commented on, he said, we do a lot in the social wellness domain that I guess I really didn't realize.
You better see. Who knew?
He said, we're in New Orleans, and so we have a lot of opportunities. We do a lot of social wellness here. And, so we have journal clubs at all these great restaurants. And, Mardi Gras season comes around, and we have parade parties and all these opportunities where people are getting together and celebrating. And, it is interesting to be able to hear how different people approach and how different people think about the different dimensions and what comes out. So I'll pause there, kind of let that digest. But this is how the concept came to be, and so it's been exciting to see how these things intertwine, and that then can be transformational.
Well, I love this, and I especially appreciate you giving the shout out to Dr. Wendy Ward. I think, and I'm pretty confident saying that she is the most frequent flyer on the Faculty Factory podcast. So if you're curious to learn about Wendy Ward, W-A-R-D, go to facultyfactory.org. Her titles of episodes are New Roles, Change, and Post-Traumatic Growth, 10 Tips to Build Your Clinic-Based Teaching Skills, Leadership Skills, Clinicians Looking to Get Published, Questions to Ask Your Mentor, Interprofessional Education, on and on and on. So kudos to you for giving the shout out and lifting up and amplifying others. So yeah, we love Wendy Ward.
So I'll say that one other aspect of wellness that one of the dimensions that people often think, this is wellness's physical dimension, that we put our focus in focusing on self-care as being exercise. Are we sleeping well? Are we eating well? And so we sometimes get too focused there. And one of the things I'll focus on my workshops is helping people to understand that there are 6 dimensions to wellness, right? That's not just one, that physical dimensions is part of it, and that we have to make sure we're paying attention to that. But how are we paying attention to those other aspects? And so that emotional dimension being one of it. Are you able to regulate your emotions? Are you aware of what your emotions are? I work with a lot of adults who can't label their emotions.
Hand raised here. When I was in therapy, she said, well, what are you feeling? I'm like, well, she's like, well, how many feelings do you have? And I said, I'm angry or sad or mad. Is that it? She's like, that's it. I'm like, I think so. I get angry and mad, and then I'm sad or maybe glad. She's like, Kim, there are a lot more than that. I'm like, really? You have to drop into the fullness of your feelings. And I'm like, gosh, I was unfamiliar. So you're so right. It's just such an ignorance of, a lot of us, especially the high thinkers, we purposely avoid feelings. And so, to actually, she showed me this feeling wheel. I'm like, there are that many feelings? Really?
Yes. And so when we actually are able to tap into and understand, when we can step back and say, I feel off balance, right? What is this feeling that I'm having? Why is this occurring now? What is this happening around me? How do I make sense of this? How do I understand this? How do I, get myself back on track, but understand what got me off balance to begin with? One of the aspects that I've started to incorporate in recent workshops that's been a lot of fun is helping to increase people's self-awareness through things like DISC assessments or PACE palette. So things like that are really fun opportunities for team building as well. So not only do you get to know yourself, but you also get to know others in the room who are part of your division, part of your section, that you can get to know how these folks like to communicate, how they communicate best. And if there's somebody who would prefer a quick email or who maybe don't need that lengthy response, and, a shorter response is really something they're going to be able to hear a lot better. If they appear to be defensive, but that's really not what they're intending to be, So understanding more about different people, how that increases our self-awareness, but also how that then improves our relationships to others, and how all of that also contributes to wellness, and how that also makes all of this sustainable, right? The more we understand ourselves, the more we understand others that we work with all the time, and the more we have flexibility, that is all what makes this wellness process sustainable.
Yeah, we'll love it. So we have Remind us again, it's the physical dimension, the emotional dimension, the social,
Mhm.
spiritual,
Intellectual and occupational.
occupational. Okay,
Mhm.
got it. So what else in your workshops? How do you like flesh this out? So I heard you saying that we're gonna obviously start with physical. People think that's it, throw down a yoga mat and you'll be okay. But then learning about our emotions. How do you get into the social, spiritual, intellectual, occupational dimensions?
Yeah. So I think when it comes to occupational dimension, for some people, it's stopping to think. When I'm talking with trainees or I'm talking with residents and fellows, we'll talk about there are things that you are out of your control right now in terms of your schedule. And in terms of the system in which you work. So in thinking when you move forward in your career, how would you like to work? When you can start thinking more about what type of environment do you want to be working in, think about those things now. What do you like about the work environment? What do you want to change? There's certain things about the hours that you're working, maybe the way that you work that you would like to be able to do differently. That you could be able to change that in the future. I do always tell my faculty working in academic medicine, because we're on these kind of academic years, that I do see there an opportunity every year to have a potentially a small reset. If there are things you're like, I don't think this year's schedule really worked for me, that maybe there's a different contract that you can switch to, or maybe there's a new opportunity that's coming up that you could see that you could change into starting next academic year. So being aware of that, and if you notice that, then that's a shift to make in your occupational dimension. So having that awareness of not feeling stuck with the work that you're doing, and if you start to feel like you're feeling stuck, being able to talk with your leadership to be able to have those conversations of what kind of adjustments can I make to the work that I'm doing currently, because I don't feel like this is really meeting my needs as much as
Yeah.
it was, or I'm not feeling as energized as I used to in my work. And maybe that is, for people who have maybe a new child at home and your childcare demands have just changed, right? I need to adjust my work hours. I need to come in later. I need to leave earlier. Those things that we can make those adjustments so that that can better fit somebody's lifestyle for that phase of life. So how can we help make those adjustments to better meet the needs in the occupational dimension? And knowing that that can be a phase of career change that needs to occur too, right? So how do we pay attention to that? I'll also say during my workshops too, of each piece of the pie is not created equal. So depending on where you are in your phase of life, so I'll kind of use myself as an example. So at the time when my mom was sick and my mom was living with us, I knew that my emotional dimension, I needed more emotional space at home. I needed to make sure I had more of that emotional time at home, because that was going to take a lot out of me. So I actually reduced my clinical time at work, and I did more administrative duties at work, and I kind of changed the type of work that I was doing. So I shifted my occupational dimension so that I could have more emotional resources when I got home, because I needed more of that bandwidth when I was home versus when I was working. So knowing that depending on the phase of life you're in, you're going to need to shift what piece of the pie you really need in terms of that dimension of wellness, right? So there are other times when you might need more social time, right? There are some people who are extroverts and they really need to be around other people. I need to be with my friends. I really need to engage with others, and that is what drives me. And I love that time. And others who really need quiet time. I need to sit quietly in an office. I need to focus time. I need some time to just get into the flow and be able to work. And if they don't have that, they can get very irritable and have a hard time being able to finish tasks, right? So understanding those things that you need, and is now a time that you need to put a little more focus into that particular dimension to get that need met for yourself.
Dr. Moore, I really appreciate you raising awareness about this, because you said so many things that are important. And what I appreciate through my coaching lots of faculty and being around for a few decades and doing this work is that I think sometimes we expect to be able to continue doing things the way we've always done things. And then we are shocked or dismayed or disappointed that I'm putting little quotes around that, just doesn't work the way it used to anymore. So I'm doing the same, I'm eating the same diet and that doesn't feel right anymore. I'm doing the same workout and it doesn't feel the same way. I'm, mentoring the same way, but it all of a sudden doesn't feel right. And that groove I was in now has become a rut. It was a good groove for a minute and now it feels rutty. Or I'm not as intellectually excited by this. I've done this procedure 10,000 times and now I'm not excited by it. And I think sometimes we tend to think, well, gosh, I mean, this is the way it's supposed to be. And now what do I do? I don't have any choice. I think sometimes we don't realize that we have this internal locus of control, that we are somehow chained to external forces, that I've chosen this career, I've chosen this path, I've chosen this research agenda, I've chosen this field of specialty, and oh, hey, I've made my bed, now I have to lie in it, rather than realizing I have choice. I can say, what about this, or shifting there. So what I really appreciate about your posture in this space is that, again, the awareness of yes, and I've done this and I could still do that, but I can pivot, I can explore, I can go higher, I can go deeper, I can go broader. I can do whatever I want. So this recognition of that, first of all, being able to do that, I think is just such a gift that we can give to ourselves, as you pointed out, in the different phases or seasons of life where perhaps this is just not working anymore. So, and that's okay. That's normal. That's called growth and evolution. And factors change in our own personal lives, in our institutions with leadership, and our cultures and our environments, micro, meso, national, things change. And so recognizing that we have the authority to make some changes in we are, me incorporated. We can do that. So that's a beautiful message that I really appreciate in your way of thinking in your workshop around sustainable wellness, Michelle.
I love that you bring that up, because I think that is a really important concept, because I think what you're describing is often people think that, right, I've arrived and then I stay and I do the same thing going forward. And to me, what I hear you describing too is why mentors and coaches are so important, because those are the folks that help us to be able to see it's okay to change. And we do know there are certain behavioral styles and personality styles that struggle with change, and change can feel uncomfortable.
Right.
But change can also be really invigorating, and it can be exciting, and it can lead to new things that can actually further your growth and actually feel really good to venture into new territory. And I think we have to be open to that, and we can be open to change. And I do think that's part of what my message is the fact that this idea of sitting back and reflecting, taking that opportunity to stop and reflect, where am I on this wellness journey? Where am I right now at this moment in time? And that's what our mentors and coaches help us to do, right? Where are you right now? What do you need? Where are you going? And we shouldn't stay on the same path, because guess what? Life isn't a straight path. And it definitely isn't just like upward, where you just kind of keep going up and everything just gets greater and more wonderful. And at least I haven't met anyone whose life has worked out in that way, right? There are bumps and there are curves and there are things, just obstacles that come in your way that are unexpected. And the more that we can have this flexibility and be open to, wow, that's the growth mindset, right? Wow, I wasn't expecting that, but what can I learn from this moment? What can I take away from this moment? What can I shift to then switch? What do I need right now? Because this used to work for me. This isn't working anymore. I think of the person, who is a big runner, let's say, and has surgery on their knee and can't run for 6 months, right? They can no longer feel their physical dimension in the way that they used to. And so they have to lean on, what else can I do to take care of myself in terms of wellness while I can't do the thing that I typically do? We have to be able to find this balance and be able to pivot in other areas. We can't rely on one sole area for self-care and for wellness, because that is not sustainable.
Right. I like when I'm doing the coaching, and as a gerontologist, I do it programming around advanced career. We talk about traditionally early career faculty, lots of leadership and mentoring and mid-career malaise type and helping people think about leadership positions. And then advanced career, it's oftentimes like, who am I becoming? I guess it's across the whole life. So who am I becoming?
Mhm.
What is next? Who am I? What's the next iteration of me? And so I think that's really important thread to remember. It's not, as you said, it's not a finite, now I'm done. I've checked all the boxes. I've made all the, met all my goals and accomplished the degrees and the titles and the awards and whatever you want to do. And then you just sit and stay. It's always for people like us in academia, like, what's next? What's the next chapter? So who am I becoming? Now I'm going to pivot because again, another reason why I think what you're talking about is so important is this recognition of that awareness. And I always remember when I was first came into academia and had to do these, look at how I'm even saying it, annual reviews. And the annual reviews, it's oftentimes at different institutions, a form, you have to fill it out, you have to submit, your CV that's got to be updated, your recent works. And at least, at Hopkins, it was a kind of a big thing. And it was always like when I would get that email, Kim, it's time for your annual review with Dr. Durso. Make sure you filled out this form, done this form, submitted this, uploaded that. And I'd always be like, ugh. And despite that, yes, I was like, yes, another thing to do. It was always illuminating because I'd open up last year's documents, of
Yep.
course, just to plug and play. And I go, oh, I said I was going to do that. What was I thinking? I didn't do any of that. Or, but didn't I do other stuff? And then I'll go look back and I go, oh, I did do lots of other different stuff. And then I sit there and go, that's pretty good. Look at me go. And, oh man, I didn't do that. So that as much as we kind of get bogged down on some of those mandatory things, some of them, especially the annual review, is opportunity,
Yes.
like a forced reflection. And so the way you're saying, marrying faculty development and wellness, sustainable wellness, that's a perfect opportunity if all of us as faculty members and leaders can really authentically use that moment, that annual review process, as not only how many RVUs did you generate, how many papers did you write, how many grants did you submit, how many dollars did you bring in? Yes, we all know we got to keep the lights on. And
Yes.
who are you becoming?
Yes.
Geez, during this process of putting this documents together, Kim, what did you notice about yourself? I noticed that I don't want to do that. I said I was going to do it. And the reason I didn't do it because I don't want to do it. And I hate doing that stuff. So, well, what do you want to do instead? Well, I find myself, oh, okay. So I think that's an example to me of what you're talking about, of the interconnectedness.
That's the perfect example of, something that's a staple item that we all do every year, or should do every year, the annual review, an opportunity for wellness. And one of the things, so Bob Zura is the orthopedics department chair, and when him and I sat down last year, I said, well, what do you do for annual reviews? He said, well, I do a standard form. And I said, well, let's make that an opportunity and make an opportunity for a discussion to sit down and talk. And we started talking about it more. We revamped the form, and and he commented of how different those conversations went, because we just took a bit of a different approach in how he was thinking through those conversations as real opportunities for, like you're describing, let's discuss all the great things you've done this year and where are you going? Where do you want to go? What do you need? What can we offer? How can we support you? And being able to get to that next step where you're going. This is more than just a checkbox. Yeah, there's the standard, got to keep the lights on part, but there's also all these other reasons why we're all here. And so let's focus on that. And to me, that's part of the spiritual dimension. Right? It's the meaning in the work. It's the purpose of the work. And that's the purpose of why you're here. And so that's what part of what fills that dimension, that reflection on the year past, but it's also a look at the year ahead and 5 years ahead and where are you going? And how can I help you to get there? Which also not only is good for that individual faculty, but then for that leader, right? It feels really good as the leader to help support people get where they're going.
Because I know, and we all know there are people out there who are going, oh, all this woo woo. Listen, I don't have time to care about your feelings. I don't have time to ask how your dog is doing. We're all busy. If I stopped and reflected and was all touchy-feely and having conversations and taking time with everybody, I wouldn't get the work done. I didn't get here by being all gabby, chatty, and Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. This is nice in theory, and I'm glad there are people like you, Kim, who do this kind of stuff. But some of us have real jobs to do, and some of us, what is the and I might be kind of slightly exaggerating, but we know that this is some, people's mindset, and I can appreciate it and I understand. What would you, as a psychologist, and the fact that you're working with orthopedic surgery is kind of like is a win there. So kudos to orthopedic surgery at LSU. What are some techniques that we can do without being over the top of like you have to care about people? How can we, and because we know their data, we know their evidence, we know there's decades now of research pointing to the value of investing in relationships and people that does pay dividends, not only spiritually and holistically, but to the bottom line in terms of turnover and cost and just group morale and engagement. But what do you do in those situations, or what kind of nuggets can you communicate to us? How to nip that kind of attitude in the bud?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And there's always going to be people who will have those comments. I think that's one of the things I've accepted over time is there's always going to be people. And I think as a psychologist, often people think, well, you're a psychologist, so of course you think that way, or of course you talk about feelings, which is true. Yes, that is true. You can't deny that. What's been really helpful is being able to be exposed to the orthopedic surgery world is actually being able to hear some of the conversations that are had in that space, and being able to hear some of the simple things that people can do. When you walk into an OR, you ask everyone what their first name is. And you welcome everybody to the room and you acknowledge everyone who's in the room, and you say, everyone says their name, and you know who is present and you know who is there. You say hello to people.
Wow, wow, profound. Hello, what's your name? Don't we
You
learn
know?
that in preschool?
I mean, we're not talking rocket science, but it sometimes can be that simple, and it can be those simple gestures. And I will give the caveat, yes, I live in the South and I live in New Orleans. And so we are a city that makes eye contact when we walk down the street. We will wave to each other. We will say hello to each other as you pass. Hey, how you doing? And we actually say, I'm good. How are you?
How civil, how
Which
civil.
may be different in other parts of the country. I'm very aware of that. But those little moments, right? To say hi to somebody, it can be as simple as that. And it doesn't have to be a long conversation of how you doing, that you spend 10 minutes checking in on how the kids are doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you've got the time, I think some people do really appreciate that. And there are other people that may not want to get into details about their personal life. But there are some folks that really do appreciate those conversations. If you see somebody, I think it's those moments when you can give praise. If you see somebody who has done something that you do appreciate, just say that. If you appreciate that someone, I don't know, dropped a note for you that, you didn't have time to finish that note, but they were able to drop the note or whatever it is, right? They did something for you that a task that you weren't able to complete, and they completed it for you. Thanks so much for completing that task. I noticed that and I really appreciate it. Those types of things, those acknowledgments go a long way. And that could be to the secretary at the front, to the nurse, the administrator, like someone just acknowledging the small things that people do, because you often think it. And I think a lot of times we think people can read our minds, and we think these things, and we think other people just know or assume that they are aware that we thought that or we appreciate them. But just say that. I appreciate you. I
Mhm.
appreciate that you did that.
I see you. I see you. I see you.
Yes.
It could even just be like you're just pointing. I mean, a colleague of mine, we passed each other in the hallway and we had just had come out of the meeting, and I just kind of did the put in mind like, I see you. I know what you did. I saw what you did. And she's like, back at you. I mean, those kind of
Right.
little, like you said, it didn't take any time. I just pointed to my eye and smiled and winked, and she like, yeah, I
People
got
want
it.
to be seen and want to be heard. At the
Yeah.
end of the day, people want to be seen and heard. And like you said, we actually have research to document that, and we know that there's literature to back that up. And that doesn't take a lot of effort to be able to do that. And that's just a very human connection. And I think the more we can do that for each other, the more well we feel. That fills your bucket. In my book, I call it Delivering Sunshine. Like I feel good when I do those things. You feel good. It's a win-win type of situation, you know?
Dr. Michelle Moore, lovely, wonderful. Congratulations. We're going to post your book in the facultyfactory.org website. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure as always. This just filled my intellectual wellness cup. I'm on my way to go do a grand rounds on, as you guessed it, sustainable wellness. So I'm excited to continue this message and hope people enjoy the content and walk away with maybe something new to think about and a more holistic way to think about wellness.
Hi, Faculty Factory friends. It's Kim Skorupski here. Just a quick commercial for our upcoming Faculty Leadership Collaborative Mid-Career Bootcamp. We're hot off the 3-day Faculty Leadership Collaborative Early Career Bootcamp, where we had about 72 assistant professors from around the country and the world. Speakers included Doctors Susan Chubinskaya, Nutan Vaidya, Valerie Williams, Bob Tillman, Karma Fouché, Rachel Levine, Hannah Lundberg, Jennifer Haythornthwaite, Susan Matulavicius, Sonali Kandawal, and Kathleen Gamilla Crudo, Josh Polanski, and me. It was so awesome. Well, the 3-day mid-career bootcamp for associate professors is April 9th to 11th, 2025, 2 to 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, all via Zoom. The topics for the mid-career bootcamp will include Leadership Presence and Self-Management by Joe Losey at Pitt, Communicating with Emotional Intelligence with Alice Fornari from Hofstra, Leading Organizational Change with Susan Chubinskaya right here at University of Texas Medical Branch, Conflict Management and Mediation with Dave Usum from Hopkins, Strategic Thinking, Planning, and Negotiating with Rejma Jagzi from Emory, Building and Managing Teams and Projects with Wendy Bennett from Hopkins and Darpan Patel from the University of Texas Medical Branch, Finances and Funds Flow with Vin Pellegrini from Dartmouth, and Creating a Leadership Future, Preparing for Transitions with Archana Chatterjee from Rosalind Franklin. We're also going to have a panel of recently promoted professors who will share their journeys. You'll get 9 contact hours of CME, CNE, and CLS continuing education credits. You've got a curated resource guide, lots of networking opportunities. We have a half hour before, half hour after each day's events for just more community building and networking and Q&A. So go to the facultyfactory.org website. That's facultyfactory.org website. You'll find the link right there on the first page to sign up and share it with your colleagues and friends. Thanks for tuning in to the Faculty Factory podcast. We are a faculty development community sharing tools to build academic leaders in healthcare. Maybe you want to be interviewed on the podcast? Please visit facultyfactory.org/contact and send me a message there. The Faculty Factory podcast and website is sponsored by the Office of Faculty Affairs at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, Texas.